Hello and welcome to another edition of Math with Mr. Jedi. Yes, I have escaped from the big bad wolf. Actually, I'll let you in on a little secret. I was the big bad wolf. Now, today we're looking at adding and subtracting rationals. Are you ready? I promise there's no scary wolves in this video. Here we go. Hi, and we are looking at today adding and subtracting rationals. So adding and subtracting rationals. Should we talk about the intro of the video? Should we talk about that? Nah. I wonder what kind of costume that was. It's a pretty fun costume though. So today, adding and subtracting rationals. Rationals always scared me as a kid. When I saw that word, it's like, what are we looking at? Okay, this is what we're looking at today. We're looking at basically fractions, adding, subtracting fractions, and decimals. That should get you fired up. So adding, subtracting fractions and decimals. I'm going to give you some top tips, and hopefully that'll make your life a little bit easier when you're having to go and do that. A couple of things just to review, and this is the thought process that you should have when you are going and doing these. So the thought process is really important. These are things that you should memorize. And basically what I'm going to say is the very first thing you want to ask yourself, so this is what you want to ask yourself. Will your answer be positive or negative? Notice how I've written this. I use a positive sign, a plus sign, positive, get it? And then negative, the negative sign. I'm just being lazy and just writing it that way. That's how my math teacher when I was in high school showed me how to write to save some time. So ask yourself, is your answer going to be positive or negative? Well, how do you know that? This goes back to a really, really old lesson that I used to give on piles and wholes. So piles and then wholes. Basically, wholes were your negative numbers and the piles were your positive numbers. And if a pile went into a hole, that kind of negated it and made it zero. And that gave you the idea of how positives and negatives work. Now, if you've never seen this idea, you're like, what is he doing? I'll give you a quick little example. You can always go and search up some of my older videos and take a look at that. I'll give you one quick little example of that, so you're like, oh, okay, I get it. Let's just say you had negative 2 plus 5. Okay? So for this one, negative 2, so those are 2 wholes, whole, and then 5 piles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Make sense? Okay, so here's the big part though, the kicker, is that you have to fill up your holes. So if I did that, what is left over? I'm left with, that's right, 3. And we know that piles are positive, so your answer is positive 3. Another way that you might want to think about it is look at each thing separately. And just ask yourself right away, you have negative 2 and you have positive 5. Which one is more? Well, 5. 5 is a bigger number. And then you take that sign. You literally go and take that sign. So I'm going to take this sign and my answer will be positive. You can think of it that way. This is the first thing that you should always do. I'll give you one more example because this is the example that always confuses kids. Is this one, negative 3 minus 4. Another way to write it, the easier way to write it, which sometimes math people do, but sometimes they don't. So you have to be able to do both. Negative 3 plus negative 4. Now this way is much easier because when you see this, your brain says, I have 3 negatives and I'm adding 4 more negatives. So just logically, how many negatives do you have? You just have negatives. Your answer is negative 7. Just logically when you kind of think about that. Another way, if you want to visually look at it, is for this one, you have 3 holes, and then you have 4 more holes. You have only holes, and you get negative 7. The final way to look at this one, and remember this is the one that always causes problems, is think of a number line. You start at negative 3, and you ask yourself, which way do you go when you subtract? So you start at negative 3, right? You start there. Which way do you go when you subtract? You go this way. You go left, backwards. That's what students say. And you go backwards 4. Oh, okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's where you end up. 1, 2, 3, 4. Most students have a pretty good idea of how the number line works. So -4, -5, -6, and then -7. That's where you end up. So the thought process. Figure out, no matter what, instantly, will your answer be positive or negative? That will stop most of the problems. Well, what's the second thing in your thought process? What's number 2? Number 2 in your thought process. So we're still on thought process. We're still on thought process. So the second thing you add, so first off, you've already figured out if it's going to be positive or negative. The second thing you have to say to yourself is, are you going to add or are you going to subtract? So you already know that the answer is going to be positive or negative. Are you going to add or subtract? You add when the signs are the same. You subtract when the signs are different. Again, these are things you just have to go and memorize. And the sooner you do that, the less mistakes that you make. Signs are different. Let's see some examples. Look at some happy yellow. We want some happy yellow. Ooh, that's a happy yellow. Example, let's just say you had -8 plus 5. Okay, are my signs different right now? Yes, they are different. So we would subtract. Also, remember, the very first thing in your thought process, you would ask yourself, is what's my answer going to be? What is my answer going to be? Is it going to be negative or is it going to be positive? Well, take a look at those. Which number is bigger, 8 or 5? 8. Okay, I'm going to take that sign. So my answer is going to be negative. I already know that. And my teacher just said, if the signs are different, I have to go and subtract. So let's go and subtract. When you subtract, you take the smaller number away from the bigger number. Notice how I'm ignoring the signs completely right now. I'm just going and subtracting the actual numbers. 8 minus 5. Ooh, 3. So guess what my answer is? -3. Let's say you had your signs as being the same. So second example. Let's say you had, again, -2 minus, 12. The signs are the same. When the signs are the same, your math teacher just said, you want to add. What? I want to add. Because in that first thought process, I already said, will your answer be negative or positive? Right now, you should be thinking, oh, I only have negatives. My answer is going to be negative. Okay, so that's the first one. The second thought process, do I add or subtract? The signs are the same. So I'm going to go and add these. I'm going to go and say 12 plus 2. Ooh, that's 14. So my answer is going to be -14. Notice when I added, I ignored the signs. I just went and added the number. That's it. 2 thought processes that will almost guarantee you to do well for these kinds of questions. Now, I said we were talking about adding, subtracting, fractions, and decimals. So here we go. Now, teachers teach fractions, adding and subtracting in all different ways. I've taught for a number of years. Here's what I like to do. Sometimes it's not the most efficient, but it's what I like to do. I like to convert to improper fractions always. It just gives me a peace of mind knowing that it's nice and easy to improper form. And the second thing you have to remember is, of course, when you're adding, subtracting fractions, you need common, my end looks weird, common denominators. Remember, that's the bottom one. Okay, so I'm going to show you a couple of examples. Now, some of your teachers might show you a little bit different things like that, and that's okay. There are definitely different ways to be doing this that might be a little more efficient, but I've always kind of found this kind of the tried and true way. So here's my example. -2 and 2/3 take away 1 and 3/7. Okay, so thought process number 1, is your answer going to be positive or negative? These are both negatives, so it's a bunch of holes. My answer is going to be negative, so I already know I'm going to get a negative answer. Sweet. Now I just need to go and add these. Remember, the signs are the same, so I'm going to go and add them. That's what I'm going to go and do. And I'm going to do what Mr. Douglas says. I'm going to convert them to improper forms. So ignore the signs right now and just convert it. So I'm going to ignore these completely. I'm going to ignore these completely. I can do that now because I know my answer will be negative. And I'm going to just go and follow kind of the steps that the Wolf math teacher kind of said. So let's convert this. 2 times 3 plus 2. Again, 2 times 3 plus 2. So what's that going to be? 8/3. And I'm going to add that to 1 3/7. So 1 times 7 plus 3. So that's 10/7. I said we needed common denominators of 21. So that would make this 56, and that would make this 30. If you're like, whoa, where did that come from? Stop, rewind. First off, is there really a rewind button? Anyways, 3 times what gave you 21? 7. So then you have to multiply the top by the same number, 7. So 7 times 8 is 56. That's where it came from. 7 times what gave you 21? 3. 10 times 3 gave you 30. That's where it came from. Just to clear that up. When I go and do this, I would get 86. 86 over 20, there we go, over 21. Can you simplify that? Nope. So over here, I'm going to write down my final answer, 86 over 21. And you're like, wait, that's an improper answer. That's an improper fraction. Yep. I love improper fractions. I don't like mixed numbers. And there you go. That wasn't too bad, right? No, that wasn't too bad at all. Would you like to see another example? Oh, yes, I heard that in the internet land. Somebody just said, yes, I'd like another example. Okay. Here we go. Let's go to decimals. So for decimals, what are my top tips? You need to line them up. And that's really about it. So on to the examples. And again, if you follow my thought process, this gets really, really simple. So here we go. First off, remember, you're asking yourself, answer is going to be negative or is it going to be positive? And this one, all negative numbers, so it's negative. So now we have to go and add them because they're the same sign. So I'm going to add them. So I'm going to line them up, 1.46, 5.2. Some teachers like to add zeros here. It doesn't affect the value, just to make it look all pretty. I'm going to go and add them, and I get 6, 6, and what? What? My answer is negative 6.66. Seriously, I didn't plan that. Honestly, I didn't. I just thought of some random numbers. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. What does this mean? So there you go. You want to do another example? Sure, let's do another example. Let's make it a more happier example, shall we? Some people are watching this going like, what? I don't get it. Let's say you had, I don't know, negative 4.08? Sure. Plus 3.9. Sure, 3.9. Ask yourself, thought process, is your answer going to be negative or positive? So is it going to be negative or positive? And you're going to say, I'm going to have a negative answer because there's more negatives than positives. This 4.08 is bigger than 3.9. Great. I have different signs here, so I'm going to subtract. I'm going to take the bigger number and I'm going to subtract the smaller number. And I'm going to add in some imaginary zeros. Oh, this is a good question to do. Remember some borrowing things? You're going to go borrow. And that's what you end up getting. 0.18. And we know my answer is going to be negative. So 0.18. There we go. That's a much happier kind of answer. I think that about sums everything up. You saw some fractions, saw some decimals. The thought process, I can't emphasize enough, is the way to go for these ones. Until next time, have a great day. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in for another edition of Math with the Wolf Guy or Mr. Douglas. Math Jedi? Anyways, I hope you guys learned something. Go and subscribe and tell your friends about it. Until next time, have a great day. And remember, it's always fun to dress up as characters.